Hello, Lowell, and welcome to the sixth episode. That's not easy to say. Sixth episode of Recovery Matters. And this is a show of Lowell House, and it's all about addiction and mental health issues. And the episodes we've done so far, we've gotten great feedback, so we'd love to hear from you. And we hope these kinds of episodes that we're doing, especially the one today, are going to help a lot of people out there both understand what the issues are and how they can help, their brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers. There are so many people involved in this opioid issue we have and in alcoholism. 2/3 of the community know someone and have someone. So welcome, we're glad to have you here. Today's episode is called Serving Those Who Served, and it's about veterans. We've wanted to do the show for a while because a number of the people that we deal with at Lowell House are veterans. They've been through terrible issues with trauma, and as you know, trauma is one of the three legs of the stool in addictions, environment and genetics being the other two. So it's one of the great drivers of addiction issues across a lifetime and mental health issues. So we're going to talk a little bit today about those issues, but first I want to introduce my guest. To my right is Cheryl Coviello, and she is from Crescent House. Good to see you, Cheryl, and she'll talk a little bit about Crescent House as we move along. And to my left is Tilton, and he is the director of the Vet Center in Lowell. Great. And over here, taking up the end position, is our friend Bob Page. We've known Bob and Anne Marie ever since I've been in Lowell, which isn't that long, but they've done tremendous things. And Bob is a commander in the, what is it, Bob? The
Lowell Veterans Council.
Lowell Veterans Council, thank you. Lowell Veterans Council, and Bob does great work. We've had great conversations about vets. So we also want to tell you that this show is dedicated to our friend, who has also been a fellow Rotarian, a longtime Lowell Rotarian, Wally Bayless. As many of you know, Wally Bayless from the Bayless Funeral Home. Wally was retired many years, but he kept really active with veterans issues. And I'll read you just a little clip from the Lowell Sun. Wally passed away, Bob, about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Yeah. Very, very sad. Good friend to us all. As a member of the U.S. Army 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam, Bayless's duty was graves registration. After the battle, Bayless ensured soldiers who didn't make it were treated properly, and most important, were treated with dignity. And that's one of the things that Wally always did. Everybody was always treated with dignity and kindness. His compassion for veterans and his love of the city were second to none. And this is from former Mayor Bud Caulfield. It wasn't by coincidence that when a local veteran passed away, the Morse Bayless handled the arrangements. The deceased and their family were treated like royalty. And that was probably the characteristic of Wally. We'll miss him tremendously. The veterans community will miss him tremendously. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the major role that trauma plays in addiction and the dilemma that vets have, not only when they're serving, because there certainly is many instances of trauma and difficulty in serving as a veteran, but also when they return home and the kinds of things they face once they're out of the service. So I guess the first question, and I'll start with Cheryl over here, why are individuals who serve particularly prone to addiction issues and mental health issues, and why do they struggle so much with it?
Sure. So, I mean, I think that you're talking about folks who serve in the military don't all serve in a combat zone, so I think it's important to kind of distinguish between those two groups. But any veteran who serves can be exposed to some kind of traumatic event. So obviously folks who are in theater, who are in combat, they're going to be exposed to a lot of potential violence or threats of violence, and those things can really be life-altering for folks. And then I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but folks who are not in a situation like that, there's certainly other possibilities for being in the military, whether it's an accident that occurs in training or some other traumatic event that might occur where they're impacted, psychologically around that kind of life-threatening event. So any kind of event that wounds you in that way is going to have repercussions, and it's going to really impact how someone returns from war, and I'll focus on that group first. When people return, there's a real readjustment process for them. Returning to civilian life is not simple. Things that a civilian might take for granted are very difficult when you're living in an environment where your life is always at risk. your guard is always up, and you're trained to be in that environment to survive. And so when you come back, you have this heightened sensitivity. You're aware of your surroundings in a way that a civilian wouldn't be. Basic things like driving can be a challenge.
Sure, of course.
And there's other ways where you might be more jumpy, and you might.
It could be a challenge if you're not a veteran.
Well, in Massachusetts, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for folks who have been exposed to violence and life-threatening events to struggle with coming back anyway, and then to have that kind of exacerbates any of the challenges they might be experiencing, and there's different ways of coping, of course, some more positive than others, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things we notice when veterans come back is many of them already have an addiction issue, and they're unable to find a job, and so what kinds of resources do they have in the community? Let's talk a little bit about that. When they come back, who can they turn to?
Sure. So, Bill, thanks for having us on to talk about this. So I would just say that Cheryl and I both work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, right? So we work in different capacities for different sort of groups within the VA, but there's a tremendous amount of resources, both on the federal level, state level, and a lot of communities. Massachusetts is actually a really vet-friendly state.
I was amazed what you have in Bedford.
Yeah, Bedford. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe on the course of this, you can describe a little bit of it, because I didn't know about it, and I'm in this field. So.
Oh,
right, sure. So what I would say is, in relation to your issues about trauma, what the Vet Center does, and so I work for the Lowell Vet Center, and there's 300 vet centers in the country, and we specifically deal with veterans that have deployed to a combat or a war zone at some point in their military career. And we also work with anyone who experienced sexual trauma through the military, another big area. And then we actually serve families who may have lost a loved one who died while in active duty, another form of trauma. And so those are sort of the areas. So we particularly just provide mental health counseling around addictions issues and trauma issues at the Vet Center. We work closely with Cheryl over at the Crescent House, and then the broader VA as well. And there are several other agencies that we can refer to out there as well, depending on the severity of either the issue that's going on or addiction that's going on or the trauma that's going on.
Right, right. So I had Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe was a World War II vet, and he served, never ever would talk about the war, Bob, never would talk about it. But it was very traumatic to him, and he was an alcoholic when he came back and fought that all his life. What kinds of things, what can you do with some of the older vets that are here in the community? I know the Veterans Council does a lot with that.
What we do is we, like this program that I run, it's called Jacob's Well Veterans Retreat. And what we do is we meet up with these people who are having difficulties, and we give them support, personal support on a personal level. Because GIs talk a different language than civilians.
Oh, yeah.
We don't, when we're together, we talk totally different. When we're with civilians or they're around us, you don't talk about the things that you've been asked to do by your government and things that you've witnessed, because civilized people don't do that.
Right.
But we have to come home and live with it.
So do you think maybe it's some of this root of the trauma is a little bit of shame in terms of what they had to do and what they went through?
I'll tell you my own personal story. I was 17 years old. I was involved in a very horrific incident, and I had a hard time dealing with it psychologically. So what I did, being young and not knowing enough to look up to somebody like you, I self-medicated with alcohol.
Sure.
And it didn't take me long to find out I was an alcoholic.
Problem too.
I was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I had my last drink on October 6, 1957.
Isn't it funny now, just to tell you, almost every alcoholic I know, not necessarily people who are addicted to substances, but every alcoholic I know knows the exact date they had their last drink.
Because you don't have, because in my day we call it a monkey on your back.
Yeah.
I don't know if they call it that today or not, but you don't want that monkey around anymore.
Yeah.
You get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and every morning I wake up and I ask for another day.
Yeah.
Because one drink and you're gone again, But trauma in the military is a terrible thing because it's so easy to self-medicate, and other men are doing the same thing. And that's why, like Cheryl and Shaw, the work you do is so important. I've served at the Crescent House for years with the programs that I've run, and they do wonderful work. And over the past few months, they've taken some real hits that were uncalled for, in my opinion, because a couple of fellows didn't do too well, I guess. And some other things were going on, supposedly. Everything was supposedly. And then they do such excellent work that I can't imagine, Bill, that I would go to you in your facility and ask you, as a reasonable man, is your program 100% successful? And if you told me it was, then I'd never believe anything you told me again.
No, because I'd be lying.
That's right. That's my point. And
You never lie to a vet, you know.
I know you don't. and it's like the 99 sheep parable, right? The one sheep that you find is more important than the 99 that don't have a problem. And that's where you come in. And you too, lady, you and Shaw also.
One thing we like to say always, though, Bob, you know, and it depends what stage you're in recovery. Part of it is the age, part of it is your history, your genetics, and everything else. But we never give up. We never give up.
Right.
And I think with veterans, with non-vets, we know sometimes it may take 10, 15, 20 tries before a person gets sober, and ultimately they remember that date.
Oh, yeah.
They
You don't
always
forget it. You know why? Because it's just too important to you, you know? And like at the Crescent House, I had a fellow sitting in front of me one day, he's crying because he had separated his family from him because of things he had done when he was in the height of his addiction. And he'd steal from them and do whatever he had to do to feed his habit, you know? And now he's up here and he's all alone. He's from a different state and he has nobody at all. And he's crushed.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's such a problem. And I think, although it's a problem with all people with mental health and addiction disorders, I think it's a particular problem with vets who have been away for 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever they've served, and they come back and either their family is not available, they're at a different part of the country, they're at a different stage in their lives. How do we regain some of that piece? And is that a common problem you see? Maybe we'll start with Cheryl.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to respond to a couple of things too and jump into that. But I think VA is, 110% committed to caring for veterans, and the mental health services and substance abuse services we offer nationally are just incredible. So, and at the Bedford VA we offer tons and tons of services.
Yeah.
And so, part of the philosophy in VA these days is really around recovery, and what does that mean?
Right.
So, recovery for us is the whole person. How are they dealing with all of the things going on in their lives? And at Crescent House, just to speak to that for a second, Crescent House is a program for veterans who are currently homeless or at risk of being homeless to kind of help them get back on track. And we really work with them around their dual diagnosis issues, so whatever mental health issues they have, and substance issues if appropriate, and then housing and employment. And so we kind of do the whole package.
Right, and it's transitional.
Yes, it's transitional living. So, I think it's important to talk about that a little bit. But I think when it comes to families and you think about recovery, that's always a piece of the puzzle, right? So whenever we sit with folks and say, what are your goals? What do you want to do with the time that you have here with us, and how can we help you with that? It's really about, I would say, easily, 80% of the time, I want to be back with my children. Maybe a marriage is not going to happen anymore. Maybe that's complete estrangement there, and maybe they have an understanding, or maybe they're hopeful that can work. And we're really flexible with veterans around what they need to do to, connect with their children, to connect with, wives or significant others, and help people build those relationships again, with depends on the age too, right? So some veterans are older and maybe estranged from their adult children, and we want to help them connect, and we do that. And if the children are open to that, it's certainly something that we can help facilitate. And if there's younger veterans that might have smaller children, that's a whole different ball game in a sense. So they might have issues around child support, and that stands in the way, and how can we help them with their finances so that they can edge closer to being in good standing to pursue the relationships? How do we deal with the pragmatics of what needs to truly be addressed so that they can in fact achieve that goal? So it's really kind of, how do we help them physically do this?
Well, pragmatics, and so the availability of resources,
right,
like housing.
Right. Absolutely. And some are trying to get custody of their children, and so they need to demonstrate they have the housing for that. And so there's a real big picture here. And then we do have lots of female veterans, of course, and a lot of younger female veterans who are moms, and they might be single moms. We actually have single dads as well. So how do they negotiate? Maybe their children are staying with family while they're taking care of themselves in treatment. How do we help them to, negotiate those relationships and make sure they have time on the weekends to spend with their children? And, it was the holidays recently, and so one of the big sticking points when we talked about one of our recovery groups, holidays are tough and all kind of the normalizing around how tricky holidays can be when you're in recovery. What's something that you all need? Let's have a real conversation. And one of the major themes that came out of that was, I don't have any money to get gifts for my children.
Right.
And you take that for granted, right? So, or maybe we don't, but a lot of people do, right? And so we were able to kind of scrape together some resources for folks so they could actually have some gift cards to go shopping to buy their children presents, because that was important to feed their self-confidence and giving back and being able to do for their children. I mean, that's the heart of who we are as human beings, right? So I won't shut up now because I'm talking a lot, but it's the big picture.
No, I can't begin to tell you, and we all know how important those things are. We have an annual Christmas party, and the focus of the Christmas party is to have our people, many of whom are living in temporary housing or are just back from service, to have their kids there, and we buy the presents.
Yes.
And that's a wonderful time and a wonderful party for them, because they're able to give their kids, and they give their kids presents,
Yes.
not us. They give it to them.
Yeah.
So this whole piece of let's get a perspective here, because if my son were going into service now, or my daughter, I would be terrified that he or she would never come back the same. Well, of course, you hear these horror stories. So, Shaw, what do you think? Is it, should I be really scared about them going in, and what does the service kind of do to help with some of those issues while they're serving?
Well, I think so that's a big question, right? So, but the piece is that a lot of people who serve have gained a lot of benefit from serving, right? And they're very proud of their service, and I'm not sure that changes. And they have the opportunity to learn about themselves and grow and do things for their country. And they may have problems with some of the things they've done. They also may feel really great about some of the things that they've done. And they've really connected and done something bigger than themselves, and that's really, really important to folks in general, right? Is to feel connected. What Cheryl's talking about, the reconnection piece, but the memories that they have of the people that they worked with. And I don't think by the nature of just serving that there is trauma, right? There's a lot that goes with serving, right? We all have the potential to have trauma happen to us, right? I mean, we are going to have people that we love are going to pass away at various points in our lives.
Right.
We are going to have things that, we have accidents that happen throughout the course of life, whatever that it may be. So we're all going to experience that. And I think the great thing is that we're also really getting a lot smarter about trauma and how to support people around trauma and addiction issues as we go forth. So there's a lot of different treatment modalities that are out there. So I think people have a lot of benefit of serving, feel proud about it, get a lot out of it. We need the military, right? So that's not going to be going away soon. So, and I think that you asked about what's the DOD actually doing about that, and I think they've really adjusted. There are problems, but there are so many more services that are available right now while people serve on active duty, and or if they're in the National Guard or Reserve. There are many programs within the states that support them to augment the resources that they need given the special circumstances of which they live their lives for us.
Okay. So, Bob, you deal with a whole range of age of veterans. Have you seen changes over the years in how veterans are coming back? Are they coming back more traumatized, less traumatized is an issue? And also, I think, in terms of people being addicted, and this is a question for you all, how do we deal with that across their time in the service and then when they return? Because obviously, that's the top issue when they come back, is how do they deal with their alcoholism, their drug addiction, other things that may happen.
They need programs like you offer, and you three of you offer. You're dealing with a population from 20 years old to 80 years old. That's a wide range.
It is.
I'm an 80-year-old man. I don't think like a 20-year-old man. But they need help, and Jacob's Well steps in there for what you were speaking about, like at Christmas time, things like that. That's our mission, to see that we always have their back. When you're a veteran, I would never discourage anybody from going in the military. I think for me it was the best 4 years of my life as far as growing up. I went from a 17-year-old to a 21-year-old man.
Yeah.
And when I came home, and when I speak, I tell people, when we come home, they think, like I said, we go to these places and we see things that civilized people don't do and see. And then we come home, some of us are okay, some of us are a little screwed up, and some of us are a whole lot screwed up, And them are the ones that we have to pay attention to when we see our brothers, and we have to sit and talk with them and see if we can't give them some direction. Hopefully some family member will realize what's going on and give Cheryl or Shaw a call at their business, and how do we deal with this? What actions do we take? Where do we go? How do we get the thing started? And that, I guess that's the first step. The first step is the critical step, because then you're on your way to recovery. And that's a beautiful thing.
Right, right. And it seems to me there's a built-in brotherhood, sisterhood of people that have served.
Absolutely.
That they can depend on. And this is obviously for a lot of people that are in AA and NA, as you know, it's not necessarily the 12 steps that are important, although that's important. It's the fact that they know people and they know other people that are in sobriety and they can depend on them. Is that true of veterans also?
It is true. When I have no problem telling people about my addiction. And I still go with my friends, we go out and they party, and after they have a couple of drinks, I leave.
Yeah.
Because then they're not thinking like I am. You get a buzz on, and so I very graciously leave the company that I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I know I don't belong there.
Actually, a lot of our board members who are in recovery have strategies. They hold a drink that looks like a drink in their hand, so nobody keeps bothering and saying, hey, Sam, can I get you a drink?
Yeah.
I think it's tough.
I do that with ginger ale.
Yeah, right.
I already got one.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
You can put a little piece of lime and one of those little umbrellas.
Oh, yeah, it looks good, yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to know your own limits, and when we speak to people, as I'm sure you do, each person has to learn their limits.
Right.
And how to handle it.
Okay, in our last couple of minutes, give me a wish. If you could add a service, if you could add something for veterans in this country, what would it be? We'll start with you, Cheryl.
Oh, don't start with me. I have too many wishes.
Well,
Let me pick
just
one.
do one, because we don't have all
If
day
I had a
here,
wish, if I had a wish, I'd say more affordable housing.
Yeah.
There's really, especially here in the Northeast, there's a real limited stock of affordable housing, and it makes it really tricky for folks to get housed and to stay housed and maintain that when it's just so expensive.
Absolutely.
So that would be my wish.
And as you know, we're trying to do 23 sober apartments in Lowell, hoping to do in the next year and a half, and we want some of those to be set aside for veterans.
We'll take it.
Good. All right. Shaw, what do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of great resources that are out there. So I think housing is actually one of the big pieces. There are great education programs out there. And surprisingly, I think, because you and I we were talking before the show, and just like not knowing about the vet center itself, right, is that there's so many resources out there that people are not aware of.
That's right.
This show and other ways are really important for disseminating information and for people to ask, because most people don't know. So if they just call, even if we don't provide that resource, part of our job is to help people get linked. And so the more community knowledge and wisdom about the events and programs that are out there, I think that's really important.
And here's a wonderful guy to call in a good organization. What's your wish, Bob?
My wish is housing. My wife, who's my hero, is a
Anne Marie Page is everybody's hero.
I know she is, but she's mine.
By the way, a former Lowell House board member. You know that.
Yes, I do. She's been mine for 57 years. Be 58 in April. I'm looking for another 10 or 15.
You're going on 50 with us. So.
But she was approached about 3 years ago. As I say, she's a community activist, and a group of people were looking to buy a city building and make apartments out of it, and they came to Anne Marie and they asked for her support. And she said, I'd be happy to do that. She said, but we really desperately need veterans housing.
Yeah.
And throughout their conversations, they agreed to make it veterans housing. 22 units were developed.
That's
veterans only. It's been 2 years now. It's been occupied, full of veterans.
And I think it's wonderful. CBA has developed some new veterans housing in Haverhill. So yeah, I think that's probably our biggest issue too, is housing,
Yeah.
both in recovery beds and all of those pieces. So we're about ready to wind down here, but I do want to tell people out there, hello audience, that we will ultimately put the numbers of the Crescent House, of the Vet Center. We'll get information on how you can get to Bob and maybe even the dates of the meetings when we have them. Like, I don't know if they're monthly at a certain time, but these are wonderful resources, and this is a fantastic place to start. And we'll also tell you a little bit about Wally Bayless, hopefully too. So, any other last comments?
Just want to thank you for having us here today.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Well, that's
Bill.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an important topic. So
Yes,
thank
it
you.
is. And we also do want to tell you about a couple of things that are going on. We will be having our annual gala coming up, and this is a wonderful gala. Every year we honor someone locally with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and we're also honoring 2 agencies in Lowell that have done a marvelous job. Megan's House, you might have heard of Megan's House, and Zach's team. And Zach's team is opening, along with Lowell House, a new sober house facility for 18 to 26-year-olds.
Oh,
I
okay.
imagine we'll have some vets in there. It's in Pawtucketville. We'll be opening that next month. So exciting stuff. But mainly, we're honoring Brian Martin. And Brian is a former mayor in Lowell. He's was a city councilor. He's the head of school in Lowell High School now, and a terrific guy who's done. We asked him, give us a little list of the things you've done for the addiction community and mental health, and he gave us a whole book of different things that he's done. So it's a terrific guy. It's at Lindsay's, March 30th, a Thursday night. We'll have a great time. We have a wonderful auction, and you get to honor some of the people that have done this wonderful work. We're going to see both of you there, right? And of course, the pages will be there. So I want to thank you all, and I can't tell you what the next episode will be, but we will have another episode. Thank you very much for joining us, Cheryl, Shaw, Bob, a terrific group, and we'll see you. And remember, recovery matters.